Welcome to the Action Network studio in New York City. I'm Marino, and this is Green Dot Daily. We're live every weekday at 3 Eastern on the Action app. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Coming up, the NFL wildcard trends you need to know with Evan Abrams. Plus, picks and analysis for both NHL and Premier League soccer. But we start in the NBA. A day after beating the T-Wolves in OT, the Celtics are in Milwaukee for a 7:30 Eastern tip. Bucks favored by 2.5. 62% of bets are on the Bucks, but 64% of money on the Celtics. Al Horford is out for Boston. Bucks have lost 4 of their last 5 games. The Knicks, meanwhile, have won 5 in a row since trading for OG Anunoby and are 4-point favorites for tonight at 8:30 Eastern in Dallas. 84% of bets and 81% of money on New York, as Luka Doncic is out for the Mavericks with an ankle injury. And at 10 Eastern, the Suns visit the Lakers, who are 1-point favorites. 78% of bets and 86% of money coming in on the Suns, who have lost 3 of 4 games. Lakers have won 2 straight. Anthony Davis to go under 12.5 rebounds is an Action Pro top prop. Action Network senior writer Matt Moore joins us now. Let's talk Celtics first. What did you take away from the win over the T-Wolves, and what could that tell you about today's battle with the Bucks?
Big statement game from Jayson Tatum last night. He was absolutely phenomenal. He's had some trouble, honestly, late in games and clutch situations, and he was terrific in this game. Closed this game out strong, made every single big play. It does kind of tell you, we talked about the impact of whether or not Kristaps Porzingis was going to play. It kind of tells you, if Kristaps Porzingis doesn't play, this is a team that at home goes to overtime with Minnesota, the best team in the Western Conference. If Porzingis plays, they probably win this game by margin. That kind of gives you an indication of how important Porzingis is for them. On the Wolves side, look, they're really good. They're going to be a tough out in the playoffs. Jaden McDaniels keeps getting in foul trouble in these big matchups. That's something to watch out for. And they have real poise issues down the stretch without Mike Conley. So as we're kind of projecting these kind of situations with all these things, it is kind of an indication of where these two teams are at. I will say that tonight, I started off with a lean towards the Celtics, but wanted to see where the injury report was at. I've gone ahead and gone to a bet here on the Celtics plus 2.5 versus the Bucks. The injury report, as you mentioned, outside of Al Horford, is clean. Porzingis is going to play in this one. If we've got all those players, the Celtics are 15-4 straight up, 12-6 on a back-to-back the last 2 seasons ATS, and that includes 4-2 this season. They're a great team in these low rest spots. That Bucks number is clearly giving the Bucks way too much credit. We're going to be writing about this on Action Network and in the app about the problems with Milwaukee and why there are no bet currently for me for the title. So even on a back-to-back and a 5-7, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take the points with the Celtics here. I can't project this, even with those kind of adjustments for rest, anywhere near this number. I'll take Boston plus 2.5.
And I think we all expected some growing pains for the new look Bucks, but now I'm starting to wonder, how long is this going to take and what is this going to look like come playoff time? We shall see. But another intriguing matchup tonight is Knicks-Mavericks. Can the Knicks stay hot and take advantage of the Mavs without Luka?
I really want to be able to bet the Mavericks here. It seems like it's such a prime spot, letdown opportunity, all these types of things. The Knicks are at absolute peak value. Like, how are the Knicks possibly going to be at any higher value than they're at right now? My numbers say that there's a big edge here towards Dallas, given how they've played at home. The problem is that Dallas, ultimately, they are really bad versus any team with a pulse. They just have simply not performed to expectations or within the number whenever they're a dog or versus teams over 500. So as much as I want to grab what I think is a really good spot for the Mavericks here, I'm not going to try and catch a falling knife against the Knicks, who have been so dominant since they added OG Anunoby. I'm going to stay away from this one.
I don't blame you there. Since adding OG, Knicks lead the league in defensive rating. Of course, the question remains, is that sustainable? And I do wonder if they'll still bring in somebody else, which brings me to the trade deadline coming up on the horizon. Who are your top 3 players to watch ahead of said deadline?
You have to start with DeJounte Murray, and he's the name that everyone's talking about in the league, even way more so than Zach LaVine, whose trade market doesn't seem to be very relevant. It's important to kind of put some context here. So DeJounte Murray is represented by Clutch Sports. You may have heard of them. And there's a number of teams that have strong connections to Clutch Sports, not just the Lakers, the Cavaliers as well. The Suns have good relationships with them. Atlanta, obviously, having signed both Trae Young and DeJounte Murray. But it's a big reason why most people around the league expect DeJounte Murray to wind up with the Lakers. I'm told that the Hawks will be receptive to a deal if it includes Austin Reeves. If it doesn't, I think the Lakers are going to have a hard time getting a deal to add Murray, and that's going to be, I think, a tense conversation in the Lakers offices until the deadline. I'll also mention Miles Bridges, who should not be in the NBA. Just go ahead and throw that out there. He should not be in the NBA currently, but he is. And the Dallas Mavericks and Detroit Pistons are two teams I understand that have interest in adding him as a forward off the Hornets, whose team has gone completely sideways this season. So the Hornets are going to be in a little bit of a sell mode. Important note there, the Hornets will not take back additional salary. So anything that they're doing will be pretty much a cost-cutting move. And finally, I'll mention Tobias Harris and the Philadelphia 76ers. Everyone's waiting to see if Daryl Morey will make another move. You know, the Sixers kind of cooled off as of late. There's two teams I've heard that have real interest in Tobias Harris, and that's the Detroit Pistons. As you notice, they're looking for forwards. They're also in on the Pascal Siakam chase, as well as the Sacramento Kings. So the Kings have looked for an upgrade over Harrison Barnes last offseason and throughout this season. They're heavy in the Pascal Siakam approach. We heard that reporting from Shams Charania within the last 2 weeks. They're also have a little bit of interest in Tobias Harris. If the Kings decide to make a move, or if they're involved in a multi-team deal, if the Sixers go for a bigger name, I wouldn't be surprised if Tobias Harris were to end up in Sacramento. I think there's a pretty good chance that Harris is moved by the deadline.
You know, I'm a little bit surprised to hear that. Like, what do you think the need is on the Philadelphia side?
You have to understand Daryl Morey's approach, which has always been, you know, he built really versatile, well-rounded teams, and they couldn't really get anywhere. So he switched approaches, and now it's you add as much star talent as possible because those are the guys that win championships, and you figure out the margins as you go. Like, that's been Daryl Morey's approach, and it's worked out pretty well given the team's success under him both in Houston and in Philadelphia. For all the playoff flameouts in Philly, he still put together very good rosters that have had a real chance of winning the title. So I think the thought process is that Harris won a lot of money coming to the end. This is going to be their last window to really move him as the deal gets older, as he gets older on an expiring contract. Still a player that can really help you, and he'll be kind of the centerpiece of the money move in any sort of big move attempt for the Sixers. Or if they're just looking to add on the margins, they might look to instead trade out Tobias Harris for several more role players and give them as many options around Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid. But if they're going to make a move, their easiest path to making a trade starts with looking at what their options are with Tobias Harris.
All right, well, for more trade intel, make sure you check out Matt's latest article up on Action Network. Matt, as always, we appreciate the insight.
Thank you.
What's up, everybody? RotoGrinders chief meteorologist Kevin Roth here with your action weather update as we get into wildcard weekend. And the weather is certainly wild as I look at some of these games. You've got 3 indoor games, not an issue there, and 3 outdoor games, and each of those 3 have at least a chance of some ugly weather. And we'll kind of crescendo our way up to the ugliest. That means we'll start in Tampa. The only issue there is just a chance for rain on Monday night. Honestly, we're too far out to know if that rain's going to go over the stadium or hold off just near the stadium. So I would hold off on any bets or thoughts on that, but I'll monitor that for a chance of rain. It gets a lot more interesting as we go to Kansas City. The temperature there, every time I look, the temperature keeps dropping as I look at these forecast models. The latest numbers showing the actual temperature at kickoff should be right around 0 degrees with a 15-mile-per-hour wind. And that puts the feels-like temperature between 20 below and 25 below 0 during this game. That is absolutely brutal stuff. And generally, I'm the one saying, I don't care about temperature. It's not a big factor. But when you get to the extremes, the temperature does matter. It does correlate with scoring. And this is certainly an extreme. Temperature of 0 feels like 20 below. That is going to matter. This total hasn't dropped a whole lot, and I think that it should at this point, based on what I'm seeing between the cold and the wind. I certainly do think that weather will matter. It's tough to kick long field goals, and just in general, trying to throw and catch the ball isn't as crisp when it's as cold as it's going to be in Kansas City. Last but not least is the game in Buffalo. Temperature is again cold. We're in the low 20s here. You've got a chance for some snow showers. Hold off on the specifics of that until we get closer. But the big issue in Buffalo is the wind. And that's always the number one weather issue, is what kind of winds are we dealing with? And the answer is gusty winds here in Buffalo, in Orchard Park, technically. Latest models I'm seeing are sustained right around 20 miles per hour, putting wind gusts anywhere between 30 to 40 miles per hour. And we'll kind of hone in on that as we get a little bit closer. But there are some people saying gusts of over 50. I don't expect that's going to happen. There are others saying, hey, I'm only seeing 15 to 20 mile per hour winds. Those might be sustained winds, but it will be gusty, as I mentioned, easily up over 30 miles per hour with those wind gusts. And when you factor in the winds, the cold, the chance for snow, that is a very ugly weather game. We have seen the total drop pretty significantly in that one, and I think we are right to see that total dropping. And I wouldn't be shocked if there's still some room there on the under for those totals to come down even more once people start seeing what those conditions are really like in Buffalo, because it is going to be brutal. I'm going to keep you up to date on my forecast on rotogrinders.com and, of course, on Twitter or X at KevinRothWX.
Joining us now to preview Wild Card Weekend is Action Network Director of Research, Evan Abrams. So, by far the biggest spread of the 6 games this weekend belongs to Buffalo, laying double digits against Pittsburgh. How significant would it be for the Steelers to pull this off?
Massive, Maria. So if Pittsburgh can beat Buffalo as a 10-point dog or higher, it would be the biggest playoff upset since the Titans over the Ravens in 2020. But even further, if Buffalo starts to get a little momentum on game day and maybe gets up to 10.5 or 11, at 10.5, it would be the biggest upset since the Giants won the Super Bowl against the Patriots in 2008. But either way, you could put this statement anywhere you really want. Steelers win, and to be the biggest playoff upset in their history. So for Pittsburgh, it's the opportunity of a lifetime.
Indeed. I can feel the Bills fans around here getting nervous. Looking at these matchups in the Action app as of Thursday afternoon, I'm seeing the most bet sides as Cleveland, Green Bay, the LA Rams, and Philly. What can you tell bettors that are leaning the public's way?
Sure. Don't be too scared, would I guess be the blanket statement. So public sides in the wild card round, 44, 39, and 5 against the spread, 53% over the last 20 years. You say to yourself, well, that means nothing. I will say this. It's the best of any round in the playoffs. The other rounds, 63, 75, and 1 against the spread, 46%. So there is an edge in this wildcard round in the first round when you first see the teams. And it's also probably worth mentioning the Rams right now are the biggest public side according to Action Labs, 74% of tickets as an underdog. And here's just one note on public dogs in the playoffs. When the line shrinks, so moves from say +4 to +3, you're usually in great shape. Those playoff underdogs hit it just under 70% in the last 20 years. That's almost a 70-game sample size. So pretty decent for the Rams. Open 3.5, now down to 3, Maria.
Man, it would be something else if they went into Detroit and, gave the Lions a pretty poor afternoon. Let's talk about the totals, because throughout most of the season, one of the trends was success playing unders, particularly in prime time. What are the trends that you've seen in regard to playoff unders?
Sure. So if you look at the board this week, it's pretty split. About 3 games have seen the totals move down from their opener. A few games have moved up. But overall, unders, 36 and 25, 59% since 2018 in the playoffs. And in that same span, 53% in the regular season. So you do see a jump. And when you just talk about the wildcard round, also 59%, 51 and 35. The other rounds, basically 50% in itself. So like with the public, the unders tend to get the advantage early in the playoffs.
I mean, it kind of makes sense to me with especially the public side. Like, I feel like of any round, you would think this is kind of like the most obvious of spots.
Sure.
And then just being the first round, I could see a lot of teams just being tight, and especially the teams and players that don't have that playoff experience. Moving on.
Think about this as well. It's the closing number, Maria, right? So like even like the Chiefs game opened 47.5, currently 44. So that, if that one would hit, it would be against the 44. So anybody who bet it higher, that percentage of 59% would just be through the roof as well.
Copy that. All right. I wanted to ask you about the news over the last couple of days with a few legendary coaches stepping down: Bill Belichick, Nick Saban, and Pete Carroll. They've given us a lot of memories. Can you put into perspective their impact on the betting community?
Yeah, so cap tip to Chad Millman, who messaged me this morning and was like, I have a really fun idea. So here's the idea. Since 2000, there have been 24 Super Bowls and 24 college football title games. Saban, Pete, and Bill have coached in 22 of them and won 15 of them, which just sounds absolutely insane of those 48 games, but that's the truth.
Yeah.
Overall, those three head coaches, 69% straight up, 55% against the spread. That's about 1,400 games between college football and the NFL. And to me, this is probably my favorite one, and this probably encapsulates who they were as coaches or are as coaches moving forward. In their 84 combined seasons in the NFL and college, they are 50, 26, and 8 to their win total over 66%. So based on expectations, they soared. And here's just a fun one from BetLab. So in the last 20 years, NFL and college, these three head coaches combined have profited $100 ATS better, $5,919. So cap tip, we say goodbye,
Yes.
and we say maybe we'll see you soon.
Yes. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Pete. Definitely would have been profitable in any sense of the word, focusing on those head coaches and their advantages. And interesting, too, about going over the win totals, because as you pointed out, they've exceeded expectations, not only met, but have exceeded in most cases. Evan Abrams, always interesting hearing from you. Thank you for joining the show.
Enjoy, Maria. Thank you.
To hockey, how about the Florida Panthers, currently riding an 8-game win streak heading into tonight's tilt against the LA Kings? The defense and goaltending have been the name of the game for the Cats, as they have allowed just 22 goals in their last 10. As we say hello to our NHL experts, Nick Martin, and making his Green Dot Daily debut, Andy MacNeil. Good to see you both. Andy, what do you make of the Panthers and the futures market when it comes to them?
Well, like you said, goaltending, defense, that's been the big thing for the Panthers. And a lot of people would say they've sacrificed their offense. They were a prolific offensive team last year. Just a couple of seasons ago, they were the top offensive team in 26 NHL seasons. So they won the President's Trophy. They did not do well in the playoffs that season. They made a bunch of changes to the way they played. And of course, it led to a big, long Stanley Cup run last spring, one that did not end up in a Stanley Cup win. But I think they're the team that has the best chance of not only winning the Stanley Cup right now, but winning the President's Trophy. I think they're going to catch the Boston Bruins and win the Atlantic Division as well. Something I do over at CanadaSportsBetting.com is I predict the NHL standings on a daily basis. And right now, the Panthers have a 56% chance of winning the Atlantic Division. So they're just behind the Bruins, barely right now, chasing the Boston Bruins, who I don't think are very good. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in the show, I think. But the Panthers, no matter where you look, whether it's the Stanley Cup futures market, the Atlantic Division, the President's Trophy, 8-1, the Stanley Cup 13-1. I think there's a lot of ways that you can bet the Panthers in the NHL futures market right now.
Currently third in the Eastern Conference. Now, another storyline we have to ask about is Connor Bedard. He was set to be the youngest player in the NHL All-Star Game at 18 years and change, but just had jaw surgery, will miss 6 to 8 weeks. So, Nick, how does this impact your approach to the Rookie of the Year race?
Yeah, this obviously affects what is a really, really popular market this year a lot, because the odds actually went off the board right when he got hurt or within an hour, which is quite rare in the NHL. That really doesn't happen. So that this race was basically over if he stayed healthy. He was a gigantic favorite. I don't think anyone would have closed on him. Now the question is, what should the number be based off what he's going to be able to play? And I think ultimately the answer is the market has fairly adjusted. I loved Brock Faber. I thought that he deserved to have a better number than he did when Bedard was healthy. And then obviously you're kind of taking the shot that maybe something would happen to Bedard. But now the market's adjusted to that, right? If Bedard comes back on schedule, he should play enough games to be the favorite. And the one kind of interesting note that's getting thrown out there is that McDavid didn't win the Calder in his rookie year, but he only played 45 games and Panarin put up 77 points that year. So it's not an apples to apples comparison at all. I don't really think it holds much weight here. To my eye, it looks like the market's kind of correctly adjusted to this news.
Well, if you followed the Action Network podcast Line Change, you would have known about Faber because you guys have been talking about him. But Bedard's still the favorite, though his odds have plummeted significantly. Luke Hughes has the next best odds, and then Faber and Adam Fantilli. Okay, let's get into picks for tonight. 13 games on the slate. Andy, you sort of teased the Bruins earlier. Is your pick involving them?
Yeah, it is. And I'm going the opposite way, though. And full disclosure, I'm a Boston Bruins fan. So maybe, heed what I have to say here, as I don't think the Bruins have been playing nearly as well as people are letting on right now. Boston, only 7 teams have allowed more high danger chances than the Boston Bruins, according to Natural Stat Trick, Hockey Stats website. That's this season on a per 60-minute basis. So Boston, not very good defensively anymore. They've got an injury to their starting goaltender, Linus Ullmark. Of course, they've got a great backup goaltender in Jeremy Swayman. Don't know if it's even fair to call him the backup goaltender, as they pretty much share the load. So they're in a good spot there, but they have not been playing very well as of late at all. I mean, they're 9-9 straight up. So they've had the benefit of collecting some points in overtime losses. But if you look back to December 1st, this team ranks 27th in expected goals percentage in all situations, according to Hockey Stats website Evolving Hockey. So they're lumped in with some of the worst teams in the league. And now Vegas has been bad. They're 2-6 straight up since December 17th. That is the date that Adin Hill re-injured himself after just coming back and barely playing 5 minutes in a game versus the Arizona Coyotes. He re-injured himself. But he is expected to be back in the lineup. He was actually expected to start last night in Colorado, but he didn't. So there is a big expectation that he'll be in the crease tonight when the Vegas Golden Knights host the Boston Bruins. And I think that the line is still favoring the Bruins a little too much here. You can get the Vegas Golden Knights at plus 110, which I think is a pretty strong play on home ice in a big game where they're getting their starting goaltender back, presumably.
Very nice. And as you mentioned earlier, Bruins are atop the Atlantic Division, currently just ahead of the aforementioned Florida Panthers. Vegas second in the Pacific behind Vancouver. Nick, over to you. What are you betting tonight?
Yeah, my favorite play left on the board is the Leafs to beat the Islanders. I'm just not seeing this number at all. Hear enough about the Islanders from our podcast co-host, Michael Lieboff, huge Islanders fan. I get that this is like their Super Bowl. I know how this team's going to come out and want to play in this game. But that doesn't clean up that we're 40 games into the season, and this has been one of the worst defensive teams in the entire league. They're really just bottom 5 any way you want to look at it. I think the eye test would agree. Their recent plays have been really bad. And I think another interesting way of looking at it is Sorokin has allowed 3.2 goals against per game and has a 909 save percentage. And I don't think anyone who's watched them closely would think he's played bad. He's just been getting shelled. And so you look at the competition tonight, maybe the Owls clean it up, whatever. You want to buy into that kind of try harder narrative. I guess I can see that, but that's not going to figure out their D-zone play, right? That's not going to sort out bad decisions. And you're playing a Leafs team that generates a ton. They're at the top of most expected goals models right there in terms of chances created. And they're defending better. It's been a soft stretch, but they have defended a lot better. They played really well on the road in Los Angeles. They're kind of showing a little more defensive capability. Martin Jones has been really, really good. I don't think he's this good, but I don't think he needs to be this good either. I think you can give the Islanders a pretty big edge in goal here and still make Toronto a bigger favorite. So I think it's a great spot just to target a Leafs team that's playing pretty well. I wouldn't price the Isles this close to any top 10 team in the league right now. So I think it's a good time to buy on the Leafs.
Yeah, so sorry, Michael Lieboff, riding with the Leafs to his dismay. Islanders remain in the middle of the pack in the Metropolitan. Nick Martin, Andy MacNeil, thanks so much for joining Green Dot Daily. To soccer, and here are the odds to finish in the top 4 of the Premier League, which would mean getting into the Champions League. Manchester City, currently 3rd on the table, is at minus 6,600. Liverpool is currently in first, but second best odds at minus 5,000. And Arsenal, currently in fourth, is at minus 700. You can get Aston Villa currently in second for the bargain price of minus 138. Tottenham in fifth place right now is at plus money. With that, we bring in Anthony Dabbundo, Premier League, back this weekend after a week off. And you've spoken before on this show about this three-horse title race with City, Liverpool, and Arsenal. The market seems to think Aston Villa is vulnerable. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do. And certainly if you just look at, kind of the underlying metrics of these four teams, Villa have been the surprise package. They've kind of vaulted themselves into the title race. They beat both Arsenal and City just before Christmas to kind of get themselves up there. But if you look at some of their underlying metrics, they're really not nearly as consistent or dominant in the way they control games compared to those other three teams, especially Liverpool's firepower, Arsenal's defense, City's, pedigree. Villa doesn't really have that, and the market's suggesting that they're vulnerable, and I agree with it. The problem is picking which team is going to make the run, right? Because Tottenham is, the clearest competitor to that spot, but Spurs have issues of their own. Their best player right now, and Son, is at the Asian Cup. He's going to miss about a month now if on international duty. So there are some questions about who can actually make the run to challenge them. But I do think they're going to have some issues this weekend against Everton on the road. It's a shortened Premier League slate, only 5 matches this weekend instead of the usual 10. One of the highlights ones is Everton against Villa for me. Aston Villa, what they do out of possession, they try to condense the space in the midfield. They play very tight between the forward line, the back line, try to force you to go over the top and not play through the middle. And we've seen teams like, Man United have a ton of success against Villa recently, playing balls over the top, being more direct. Well, that's exactly what Everton does. Everton is one of the most direct possession teams in the league. They don't waste time trying to play through the midfield. They're very aggressive in sending the ball along. And I think with Calvert-Lewin back, he was suspended, then the suspension was revoked for this match. I think it's a huge advantage for Everton, a team that really has underperformed its underlying metrics, which, the metrics suggest if you just look at this entire season, you take out penalties and red card luck, just pure non-penalty expected goal difference, it's actually been Everton that has the better underlying numbers this season by a couple of ticks per 90, plus 0.37 for Everton, plus 0.21 for Villa. So marginally better team with Everton. Overall, Villa's defense has been really poor away from home. So I like the Toffees at home, draw no bet at plus 108. I have this right around a toss-up. So anything plus money on Everton, draw no bet. Or if you want to sprinkle them on the money line and get more aggressive, I like the Toffees.
Sounds like a plan. Now, one club we haven't talked about is Chelsea. They came into the season with the 5th best odds to finish in the top 4. They've fallen off now, are sitting in 10th. How would you bet them this weekend?
Yeah, Chelsea as high as 14-1 to get top 4. They have not been consistent enough in terms of finishing in front of goal and defensively to warrant, really making a speculative play there. They're, 14 points behind Villa. That's a big gap. Try to make up in just 19 matches left in the season. But I do think they're undervalued here at home against Fulham in this match. Both teams played in the midweek in the EFL Cup. Chelsea did get an extra day of rest. So that could help them here. Fulham had a really physical, tough match on the road at Liverpool on Wednesday. Tough turnaround for them. And really, if you just compare some of the closing prices we've seen for Chelsea and Fulham this season, Villa played Fulham at home. They closed minus 170. Tottenham closed minus 200. Brighton closed right around minus 190 against this Fulham team in the last 2 months. Well, now Chelsea's only at minus 160 at some books. I don't think Chelsea's worse than any of those teams if you're just power rating them right now. Chelsea is without Nicholas Jackson, their striker. He's struggled for finishing, but they've gotten some emerging breakouts here. Christopher Nkunku's come back from his MCL tear. He's been really impressive in the limited minutes he's played. And Cole Palmer, the youngster from Man City who now plays for Chelsea, has been their best attacking player. He's been really effective, not just creating goals for himself, but creating for others. So I think this Chelsea attack is really undervalued. They're up to 2nd in XG per 90, 3rd in non-penalty XG. It's a very impressive attacking unit. And I just don't really think Fulham has the firepower to keep up. So laying the juice here on Chelsea, I like the minus 160 on the money line. Trusting this Chelsea team, given how inconsistent they've been, is a little scary, but I think it's a little cheap as a result.
Anthony Dabbundo, we appreciate you catching us up on the Premier League, and we're going to see you in town this weekend for our Action Network event, so I'll see you then.
Absolutely. We'll be watching soccer in the corner of the bar while everybody's watching the NFL.
I don't even know if it's going to be in the corner. It might not be there at all, so brace yourself.
I'm preparing. That's just life as a soccer fan. We just get used to that.
I'm just kidding. Anthony, thanks. And speaking of, our Super Wild Card weekend is almost here. You can sweat your bets with the likes of Chris Raybon, Sean Kerner, and Stuckey at our watch party on Saturday, January 13th. In case you're wondering, we will have Peacock for the Dolphins-Chiefs game. And on Sunday, catch another live edition of the Favorites podcast with Chad Millman and Simon Hunter. It's all taking place at the Shepherd and the Knucklehead in Hoboken, New Jersey. Click the links below or go to eventbrite.com and search The Favorites to RSVP. Remember, any picks we give out here on the show, like the ones you just heard from Anthony, you can easily reference by following Green Dot Daily in the Action app. We keep track so you don't have to. That's going to do it for this Thursday edition of Green Dot Daily. I'm Maria Marino. Thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to being back here for a Football Friday tomorrow at 3 Eastern on the Action app and YouTube channel. See you there.